Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective on Drought and Hydrologic Conditions for the January 2020. It's hard to believe that we're in that year already, but we have a long year ahead. So we are hosted by the State Climate Office of Kentucky, which is housed within the Kentucky Climate Center and Western Kentucky University. The presenter today will be Dr. Stuart Foster, who is the state climatologist and director of the Kentucky Climate Center. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to you, Stu.
All right, thanks, Megan. I appreciate that, and welcome everyone as we start a new year and a new decade here with 2020. Got some general information that you've seen before if you tuned in. But we just need to take time to recognize our partners on this, that this project is made possible through a partnership with the National Integrated Drought Information System in coordination with the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. And we rely on the help and input and coordination of many partners across the state, main two being the University of Kentucky's Ag Weather Center and the Kentucky Division of Water. But also work with National Weather Service Office here in Kentucky, the various offices of the Ohio River Forecast Center and other groups. So next webinar will be in February. We'll get back to the first Thursday of the month again on February 6th, and we're recording this webinar for distribution. Before I go to the first slide, I do want to take just a moment. Some of you within the climate community may have had the good fortune of knowing Glenn Connor, who was a state climatologist before me here in Kentucky from 1978 to 2000. He started the Kentucky Climate Center, and Glenn left us earlier this week on Monday morning. He passed away at the ripe age of 89, and against great loss for the climate community here in Kentucky and really across the country. Okay. Moving forward then with the webinar, our standard outline in terms of looking at recent conditions. Certainly not much to talk about in terms of drought, certainly not here in Kentucky anyway. We'll look at a little bit at some impacts and concerns out there, and then outlooks going forward. We've got a very active weather pattern approaching us, and so a lot of interest in outlooks here. And then we'll have time to summarize, and if there are any questions, we'll be happy to address those. We've got a couple of pictures there on the left side from our Mesonet cameras, and really highlighting the just the warm conditions that we've seen so far this year, and going back to last December. Rather unusual start to the winter here, with temperatures running well above normal. And while it's been relatively dry over the last few days, that has not been the theme and is not likely to be the theme here going forward. Since we're starting out the year, I wanted to add a few slides highlighting last year, giving a little bit of a year-end summary. This map shows you accumulated precipitation rounded off to the nearest inch at our Mesonet sites all across the state. The theme is that it was a wet year. Average precipitation or normal precipitation across the state would be somewhere in the low 40s, maybe 42, 43 inches along the northern tier of counties there. And if you get into the south central part of the state down along the Tennessee border, you'd be looking at average precipitation in the low 50s, maybe 52, 53 inches. So from the low 40s to low 50s is what we would expect on a normal basis, but we were well above that across the state. You can see some of the highest amounts down in southeastern Kentucky, Black Mountain at 72 inches. Of course, you've got some orographic effects there, so we commonly have more precipitation at that location than surrounding areas. But we've got a 70-inch total there in Lincoln County, or excuse me, I think that's Casey County. and far to the west in Fulton County, one of our wet spots for much of the year at 69 inches. And even the comparatively dry areas were above 50 inches. So as I scan across there, I don't see anything in the 40 range. This next slide is an accumulative precipitation graph that shows selected mesonet stations from across the state. Again, really just tried to choose stations that kind of represented the geographic diversity across the state, and otherwise nothing particularly special about the ones we put on here, other than we didn't want to put every single station. There was enough on the slide as it was. But as you take a look at that, a couple of things maybe stand out. Once we got into March, we started to see a little bit of separation in terms of precipitation totals from the wettest stations to the driest stations. And for the most part, the areas that were the wettest became wet early in the year and remained the wettest sites across the course of the year. But the main thing that stands out there is the flash drought back in September into the first few days of October, and remarkable for the degree of dryness. There was very little precipitation, less than 1/4 of an inch on average, and it was statewide. So it didn't matter which station we looked at, there was virtually no precipitation for a period that extended a bit over a month there. And in spite of that, we ended up well above normal precipitation-wise. The next slide kind of captures that. This was generated from the Midwestern Regional Climate Center, and it ranks our 10 wettest years statewide, based on statewide average precipitation, going back to 1895. And this number will probably change just a little bit. They still get some final data in and quality assurance on that. But it looks pretty strongly that we will finish the year as the 5th wettest year on record, going back to 1895. And the other thing I would note on there is the wet period that we're in. You see 4 years out of the last, since 2011. 2011, the wettest year in the state. Last year, or the year before last, 2018, the 2nd wettest. 2019, the 5th wettest, and 2015, the 7th wettest. The normal statewide precipitation average for 1981 to 2010, 47.9 inches. Once we get through 2020, at some point next year, we will have updated climate normals that will go from 1991 to 2020. When that happens, that normal precipitation for the state will increase quite a bit, I think, actually. We may increase about 2 inches because we're going to bring on this very wet period of 2011 to 2020 into the calculation of the normals, and we're going to drop off the 1981 to 1990 period. This next slide is one that I think I've included once before. Again, it's generated from the Midwestern Regional Climate Center, and it shows something called the 24-month Standardized Precipitation Index, essentially a 24-month running precipitation total for the state. And the theme here is very simply that if you look at the last decade or more, this is the most prolonged, most extended wet period on record going back to the late 1800s. And if you look at the magnitude of that, especially over the last year or two, it is unprecedented in terms of just how wet it has been. So when we talk about our climate and think about how our climate's changing, this may be the strongest signal of change that that we find when we look at our data here in Kentucky. Now, moving on to some of our standard content, here's our last 30 days precipitation totals with the radar estimates in the background, overlaid with the numbers from the Kentucky Mesonet. They match up pretty well to the radar estimates. or I should say the radar estimates match up pretty well to the observations from the mesonet. You can see that the wettest areas are in some light yellow shading with as much as 7 to 8 inches of precipitation in those areas. Large portions of the state in the range of 6 to 7 to 8 inches of precipitation. And then a little bit drier along the Ohio River, especially as you move to the lower reaches of the Ohio River. And if you extend outside Kentucky, you'll notice that there's an area extending through Illinois, Indiana, into Ohio to our northwest that's been a bit drier. So we've really kind of been under the bullseye in terms of precipitation over the last 30 days. Looking on at 60 days, the pattern is somewhat similar. The heaviest precipitation amounts southern or south central part of the state, with totals for that 60-day period in the neighborhood of 15 inches at the high end. Other areas 11, 12, 13 inches for a 60-day period across much of the state. And then still around the Ohio River, you have some slightly lower totals, but still those totals at 8, 9, 10 inches are quite substantial for just a 60-day period, especially at this time of year in the cool season. And then the 90-day map, again, we'll just add 30 more days of precipitation on there. So now we're going back into October, the period right after the flash drought ended. And now those precipitation totals in the south central part of the state are upwards of 20 inches of precipitation there. And elsewhere across the state, large portions that are 16, 17, 18 inches. And the driest areas, if you want to call them dry, are up around the northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area at 10 to 12 inches of precipitation. But otherwise, it's pretty broad coverage throughout the state of significant precipitation over that 90-day period. If we put that into the perspective of what's normal, you've got the 30, 60, and 90-day maps for radar estimates of percent of normal precipitation. The main color that stands out there is the light blue. And if you look at the legend, you'll notice that that is anywhere from 150 to 200% of normal precipitation. So when you're looking at 150 to 200%, or up to twice as much as what we would expect, for a 30-day period, that's significant. But when you see such a large area for the 60 and even 90-day period, to be nearly 200% above normal for 90 days, that's a lot of water that we've received here in the state. You'll note that, again, we talked previously about a little bit of dryness along the Ohio River, lower Ohio River area. And again, that shows up here in the 30-day period, where we've got areas that are around normal to as low as maybe 75% of normal. But again, when you look at that 90-day percent of normal, everywhere in the state is above normal precipitation for that period. Temperature-wise, not surprisingly, if we're wetter than normal in the wintertime, we tend to be warmer than normal in the wintertime. That means we've got a lot of moisture coming up from the Gulf and from the oceans, as opposed to weather patterns that are dominated by colder air coming out of Canada. That's going to be colder and as such drier also. But if you look at temperature departures, on the left side, we're looking at departure of temperature from the average for the average maximum temperature, and compared to what's normal for the last 30 days. We've got areas of the Midwest that are as much as 8 to 9 degrees above normal in terms of maximum temperatures, and parts of Kentucky that are 7 to 8 degrees above normal, but throughout the state at least 5. So somewhere between 5 and 8 degrees above normal on the high temperature side, and then on the low temperature side, we're in a similar range, maybe a little bit less, maybe more down to the 4 to 7 degrees above normal on low temperatures. So again, been a very warm period. In particular, in the last third of December going forward. Modeled soil moisture and groundwater. Again, look at Kentucky and you've got a big green bullseye consistent with all the precipitation that were quite wet from historical perspectives. And if you look on the right-hand side at a little broader perspective on groundwater, again, lots of blue in Kentucky and surrounding areas, just a little bit of dryness in West Virginia and parts of the Southeast, but the dominant theme again here is that there has been plenty of moisture in the environment. 7-day average stream flows running above normal to, in some cases, much above normal. Those have actually been decreasing a little bit, as we'll see on the next map with the 28-day totals. But again, stream flows normal to above normal to much above normal. 28-day map shows a much larger portion of our state experiencing stream flows that are much above normal. So that's again dropped back a little bit over the last several days, but that may be changing here soon. Current flooding conditions, only a couple gauges there in the lowest reaches of the Ohio River near the confluence of the Mississippi, where there is some minor flooding reported. Otherwise, we've got some gauges that are near flood stage on the Ohio and on the Green Rivers, but otherwise no flooding at present. So, and that's an important condition, that there's no flooding at this time. U.S. Drought Monitor, again, it's a blank for Kentucky. All of our concerns from the late summer and fall have disappeared. And as you extend outward from Kentucky to our neighboring states, there's just a very, very small patch of abnormally dry conditions in Indiana. That's likely to disappear soon. But nowhere within the eastern U.S. Do we see any significant concerns about dryness. And even looking across the country, there's only a sliver of area in Texas that is in extreme drought. So again, this is about as benign as we would expect to see in terms of looking at a nationwide picture on drought. In terms of change over the last month, the green indicates improvement, and in general, the areas where there has been some drought, it has been getting better. Over the Four Corners area in the Southwest, in the southeastern U.S. where there was some dryness, it continues to see improving conditions as rains have impacted not just Kentucky, but much larger areas of the country. Some deterioration of drought conditions there, again, in Texas, particularly the eastern half, and in the Pacific Northwest and into Idaho. But again, those are, we see some degradation, but those areas are not in a severe drought situation. Okay. So that summarizes a bit about conditions in terms of precipitation to soil moisture, groundwater, stream flows, and so forth, drought conditions. And now take a look at impacts. Again, from a hydrologic perspective and drought, we don't have any concerns, but looking back over the last 30 days of storm reports, just highlighting things that we've seen across the state. No particular significance, but some light snow accumulation there on the 11th in some of the northern counties, on the 15th and 16th, or excuse me, on the 11th in southeastern counties, the northern counties in the 15th and 16th. And then there, the last bullet, a little bit of light snow in some eastern locations on January 7th. None of that accumulating to any significant depth, generally about an inch. Some areas that had deeper snows, maybe 2 to 3 inches, but no major impacts from that. We had widespread reports of heavy rain that produced flooding and flash flooding on the 16th and 17th. impacts were generally limited to some road closures. And then, and again, that was fairly widespread across the state, but again, nothing major in terms of impacts. Then on the 30th of December, we had storms across the state producing damaging winds in some areas and heavy rain. There were some reports of trees being down, some minor reports of damage to roofs, shingles blown off and such in some areas in the northern part of the state and the southeastern counties. Some very minor flooding, but no significant damage to report from any of this. In terms of the ag sector, communicated there with Matt Dixon at the UK Ag Weather Center, and the concerns, again, a continuation of impacts from the dry summer, the flash drought, and the extremely wet conditions before that. If we look at the monthly crop report, we have hay supplies 9% very short, 32% short, 57, the most common category, of being adequate, but only 2% surplus. So there's some concern about the availability of hay to be feeding cattle at this point, and some concerns not just about the inventory, but about the quality of some of the hay. Again, very extreme variations in climatic conditions during the growing season that have impacted hay quality in some areas of the state. And then if we look at beyond hay and just look at condition of livestock, 63% in the good category, 5% in the excellent. So that's 2/3 right there in the good to excellent. But there is concern after the last couple winters of very wet conditions producing problems in terms of pastures, feedlots, and such. We started out pretty good. We were warmer than normal, and we started to dry out a little bit, but the rains came back, and with the outlook, there's concern about very wet conditions developing and persisting. The problems that we experienced last year were exacerbated because we had an unusual number of cloudy days to go along with the very wet conditions. And so when the cattle's hair got wet, they had a difficult time getting their coats dry with the cloudy weather and the wet conditions. Again, concern about the possibility of those conditions returning, though our temperatures again have been much warmer so far this winter. Now, looking ahead, the 7-day quantitative precipitation forecast, if you've been paying attention to local weather forecasts the last few days, you've seen reports of heavy rain potential on the way. And that's what we see here, although we see a little bit of a splitting that suggests that while Kentucky may expect something in the 2 to 3 inches of rain across much of the state, it could be worse. There's an appearance now that the heaviest amounts may be to our northwest and to our south. But again, that's subject to some change going forward. In any case, no matter how you look at it, it's expected to be a wet 7-day period all in all. 6 to 10 day outlooks. In the past, we've just put the precipitation outlook for 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 days, but I went ahead and added the temperature outlook too, and in part just because of how strong the signal is, and again, the fact that we've been running above normal temperature-wise now for quite some time. So on the left side, you do see the temperature outlook for 6 to 10 days, and if you look at Kentucky there, you see basically about a 70% likelihood of being above normal in terms of temperatures. That's pretty strong indication of warm temperatures here over the coming period. And given that we're already in the 9th of January, that takes us through a good chunk of the month once we add that outlook to what we've seen already. On the right-hand side, you can see that we're again in a bullseye there in parts of Kentucky and Tennessee in terms of an area that has a 60% likelihood of above normal precipitation. Other areas around the state, 50% chance of above normal precipitation. So that means about a third of a chance of around normal precipitation and very little chance of being below normal during that period. So, and the key thing there, I think, is to, in addition to seeing that we're in a bullseye, is that most of the country is expected or has an enhanced likelihood of above normal precipitation. So we're just in a very active weather pattern in terms of the storm tracks coming across the country. 8 to 14 day outlook, largely the same story. We've got a bit of a trough in the west, with some colder temperatures and some ridging toward the east with some higher temperatures expected to hang on. The probabilities of above normal temperatures are a little bit weaker there, but again, we're extending the outlook now from 6 to 10 out to 8 to 14 days. So we would expect a little bit less confidence or certainty in our outlooks as we do that. On the right side, again, we see a large area that encompasses all of Kentucky with an enhanced likelihood of above normal precipitation, and that's in the roughly 50 to 60% likelihood of above normal precipitation. So when we say above normal, statewide average precipitation for Kentucky in January is about 3.5 inches. Again, strong likelihood that we're going to exceed that based on outlooks here. And historically, while I don't have a slide on it, if we look at the range of variation of January precipitation, January is one of our most variable months. We've had some of our largest monthly precipitation totals of any month of the year occurring in January, including the wettest month on record in Kentucky, which dates back to January of 1937 when we had the Great Flood on the Ohio River. So having said that, it's been quite some time, about 25 years or so, since we've really had a particularly wet January. So not the case for February or other months, but in any case, January historically can be a very wet month. We're expecting to be a wetter than normal month, even though that hasn't been common over the last couple decades or so. The monthly outlook, and again, we're on the 9th, and the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlook's going to take us through most of the month. So pretty good confidence again that we expect to see above normal precipitation. So enhanced likelihood there. And this outlook was produced on December 31st. So if they were updating this today, I suspect it would be tweaked up a little bit. But again, that's my speculation. On the right hand or on the left hand side, again, the area where it's indicating a slightly enhanced likelihood of above normal temperatures. And again, my speculation is that if we were to update that today, that would probably be tweaked up a little bit. Seasonal outlook for January, February, and March on temperature has us equal chances of being near, above, or below normal on temperature. So just no strong signal for us. There is an enhanced likelihood of colder conditions to our north, warmer conditions to our south, but we're in that in-between zone. When we look at precipitation, an enhanced likelihood, about 40% likelihood of being above normal precipitation, leaving us about 33% of probability of being near normal and about 27% of being below normal precipitation-wise on a seasonal basis. A monthly stream flow outlook from the Ohio River Forecast Center there in Wilmington, Ohio, has the entire state identified with a likelihood of above normal stream flows averaged over the month of January. However, wanted to put this slide in here. So this was generated today, came out of Ohio River Forecast Center, providing a flood forecast based on the likelihood of heavy rains coming over over the next few days. And again, you can see that most of that risk of flooding is to our north in Indiana and Illinois, the Wabash River Valley, but we have some areas where there could be some flooding develop in Kentucky, but no major concerns at this point. So unless that storm track changes and some of that shifts, hopefully we'll get out of this without too much difficulty in terms of the flooding side of things. Seasonal outlook for flooding, and this is looking at January, February, and March, so a 3-month period. And you can see a good bit of orange and some red that indicate minor to moderate long-range flood risk here in the state. And again, that's based in part on the fact that we're generally running above normal in terms of stream flows right now, and we continue to be in a wet weather pattern with a seasonal outlook that gives us a slight likelihood of being above normal. So basically we're not experiencing flooding conditions, but we're kind of primed and ready that could materialize if we were to see some particularly heavy rainfall events target our state instead of areas surrounding us. So to summarize, bring all this together, following the September flash drought, precipitation has been persistently above normal, as reflected in those 30, 60, and 90-day totals. Some areas along the lower Ohio a little bit drier, but all in all, we simply flipped the switch after that drought, after we came out of that, and went right back to being extremely wet. Short-term outlooks indicate a strong likelihood of significant precipitation, possibility of flooding. January brings an enhanced likelihood of both above normal temperatures and above normal precipitation. And in terms of impacts, again, temperatures have been above normal, but there is some growing concern about livestock due to the precipitation outlook and fears of a repeat of the last couple years, couple winters. But we'll see how that plays out. Hopefully we don't have to deal with that situation again. So with that, Megan, I'll send it back to you, and we can open up and see if we have any questions.
All right, thank you for your presentation. So for now, we will go ahead and open up the floor for any questions or discussion that you guys would like to do. So if you do have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or type it up in the chat box if you don't have a microphone. I'll give a minute or so for any feedback, and then we'll conclude the webinar. All right, it appears that we don't have any questions or comments, so thank you so much for your attendance today. The next regularly scheduled webinar will be on February 6th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. And if at the conclusion you decide that you do have any questions or comments, feel free to email Stu Foster at stuart.foster@wku.edu or give us a call. And thank you again for your participation, and I hope you have a good day. Thank you.